are we doing now, Chief?
We're on the last one here, I think.
Number 4.
Like to reconvene, please? This is going to be,
All we have is,
I wasn't quite sure what to do with this. I had lots of questions too.
downtown roadway section.
No, that is a redneck pen.
well, it's, you know, yeah, I
Graphics, I
guess.
love
Will
graphics.
you ask them exactly what they wanted us to do with this? 'Cause I'm not quite sure. And I have lots of comments and questions that I'm not.
Well, I think that
It's 40-foot, it's a triple slide, and we don't have slides now. That's changed for years, that's what computer has.
It's all slide out.
Right, and it has opposing slides in front, king-size bedroom.
My brother, one of my brothers has got, been in
Tell me how
RVs
many
like
trees
that
they
for
can
years,
put
he's
in
not
one
anymore,
that's not,
And that slides.
it's a
Yeah.
very broad statement about a vision.
Well, they're not.
So, you know,
Did you have the opinion this is for
but now you trade that in, or are you gonna sell it
Beach
separately?
Road or
no, it's for
for
downtown,
the side road or for
downtown,
downtown?
yeah, downtown road sections.
The downtown, okay.
Oh, I see.
Well, that's,
Okay, let's
I thought it.
You sell it.
get started here. Jay, are you going to
Yes.
read this into the record?
Trade in all.
I think that's why I apologize.
Mrs. Vance?
I'm here. Second. This is downtown right-of-way conceptual cross-sections for discussion purposes only. This is a conceptual. It's not ready for ordinance yet, but it's getting close. We have community development here to provide you with the sections, David Merchant and Jay Sweet. Jay, if you'll take it away.
Sure.
Let me ask you, say for discussion purposes only.
Correct.
He put it in there.
Okay.
You'll see it again when it's in an ordinance, so when we're ready for closer to adoption, you'll get it.
Thank you, Jay.
Good morning. I want to introduce David Marchante. He's a member of our staff. David is one of our planners, and he's also doing GIS and CAD work for us. So
Good morning,
he's
David.
got quite a few
Welcome.
talents. What we want to talk about this morning is as we're completing the major improvements downtown, people are becoming very active in their desire to do some redevelopment, which is what we want. And part of that has to do, we need to address a couple items. And one of the big item I would say is how we're going to keep this walkable, interconnected, and how we're going to do this. And what we have downtown, we have a lot of roads that are 50-foot right-of-ways. We have one or two that are 60-foot right-of-ways. And we want to create a set of scenario, cross-section, so that people could take a look how the road could be utilized to be activated, even as it goes into the townhouse and multifamily, and even to some of the single-family areas that are on the plan. And so what we've come up with is a bunch of ideas that we want to talk about of how to do this. And of course, on-street parking is one of those things, because along with that, there will be sidewalks so that the pedestrians have a safe way to go, and of course, some landscaping. So what we've done,
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
You mentioned 50-foot and 60-foot.
yes.
Where are those?
Basically, the 60-foot right-of-way is Ragsdale,
Okay.
and everything else except, and Feltz, everything else is 50-foot. So this would be some of the scenarios.
All right.
The other thing is that I'll go ahead and do it now. I have one developer who's coming and is talking to us, who's actually willing to give us more right-of-way in front of his property if he can figure out how to make the on-street parking work better.
Yeah, okay.
And so we will see some of that, and when we get to one of the cross-sections, I'll explain that a little bit better.
Could I ask
To you.
one more question too? Are you looking at this to be, one of these choices to be consistent through the whole thing? Or are you looking at, in various areas, choosing a different one?
I think that this is something that, and this will be the art of planning versus some of the science of it. I think that any one of these could be consistent, but I think once we decide or set a pattern, and I think that would be something that happen as redevelopment occurs, we'll have to pick the one for a segment of a road. It's not going to be willy-nilly, lot to lot. So let's say that you come down Wilson on Poland until you get to Childers. That could be set to a certain standard. Or Horn between Ragsdale and
So you could
Hampton or
change,
something could be a certain-
depending on how appropriate it would be to change.
But it needs to be by segment. So once we
Okay.
establish a segment, we're not going to let people have parallel parking here and back out parking here, have people backing into people. I mean, we're not going to
Okay.
we're not going to do that. So it'll be something that would have to be decided as we go forward. What we're going to do is show the possibilities, and if there's something that you think is just terribly wrong, then we can get rid of it. If there's something you think that is, wow, this is really the preferred, then we can encourage it. But we're looking at these options, and they work depending upon the situation. I will give you an example of something we're working with right now. Nothing's cast in stone, the library site. The back of the library is along Shriver. The library has approached us about putting angled parking all along the road, along Shriver, where you have single-family homes across the street. If we decide to do that, if that decides to be the thing that should be done, then we would obviously set for that entire block, that road segment. We would pick that plan, and that would be the plan that would be established there, and then redevelopment on the other side would be affected by what we do. Anything that we build in the right-of-way is public parking. And so that's one of those things that I can't stop somebody who lives in a townhouse from parking there, but I can't guarantee that they can park there. And so if you look at the development standards, and one of the discussions we're having with some of individuals downtown is our code, being an urban code for the downtown, requires one parking space per unit. Well, maybe they want two. So if they can activate the street, they can have that parking, which is open to the public, guests, whatever. They can provide the parking on their property that they have, that they need, and that would be one of those type of options. Some of the others are talking about, what if we donate property, can we do things, and we'll have to ferret that out as we actually see plans that come forward. But the idea here is to activate the street. So everything we have is not only parking, it is also sidewalks and landscaping.
So, just, excuse me, I'm to understand that these right-of-ways are existing?
Correct.
So it wasn't something that the city took by eminent domain or anything, they were there?
They're there, and we're trying to fit what we can in there.
I got you, okay. And you said Ragsdale and Feltz was 50 foot?
60.
60. And the other one,
Everything else is 50.
everything else is 50?
Except for a little piece of Childers and a little piece of Reynolds around the banyan tree. Those were 70, and that's where we've already put the parking in.
Okay,
As part of the
yeah, right.
redevelopment. Yeah.
Okay, the question, for example, in Ragsdale, that would run clear through to Matheson, whatever.
Whatever happens. And it may be that on Ragsdale, because the nature and the volume of the road, that none of this would be appropriate.
Okay. The second question is down at Feltz. It would go clear to Imperial Parkway.
Feltz would go all the way from Dean up to,
I mean, pardon me,
Wilson.
I mean Dean Street.
Right.
Dean Street would go all the way, not just to Matheson, but it would go clear to, this would apply clear to Imperial Parkway.
The way that the code is written, it would stop at Dorsch. Because,
Stop at Dorsch.
because Dorsch is the limit of the downtown.
So it brings up one little question. When we did the new development down in the corner of 41 and Dean,
Mm-hmm.
as I recall, because of the bonus density that was granted there of 27 units,
Right.
I believe some of the parking, the required parking for that development is actually on Feltz Street.
The way
14
that,
of them.
if I recall, after everything shook out, is that because of the lower requirement of parking, he finally got his parking required on his property, but he felt it wasn't near enough. And so what he wanted to meet his requirements, not necessarily city requirements, was put on Dean Street. That's correct.
Yeah, because when it left here, I remember that there were 14 allocated to the development
Right.
that were public parking on Dean Street. So this improvement is just going to go down there, then one block past this new development.
Correct. Correct.
So it's really not significant.
No, for Dean Street it is, and of course, that all presupposes that project gets built, because it has apparently stalled, because they haven't done anything. They had deadlines they were supposed to come in and meet that have passed. But we shall see.
I see I see cranes and stuff in there the other day, so. Okay, but the point of the whole thing is that if it's just
Call
going to
code
run up
enforcement.
one block past the existing approved development
Right.
is essentially what it is. Because I had some very serious concerns about school buses and garbage trucks and all this sort of thing. And so I visualized this going clear down to Imperial, which would create a bit of a problem.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll start with the first one. This is a typical 50-foot section. And in this one, we show the option that you could have parallel parking on one side, a 7-foot sidewalk adjacent to the parallel parking, your road lanes, a planter on the other side, and a sidewalk. So this would be a scenario where you could have parallel parking on one side and other improvements on the other. And there may be some streets this works, and I'll give you an example. One might be Dorsch, because the east side of Dorsch is out of the downtown, the west side is in. It may make sense to put the parallel parking on the side that's in and not. So this could be an option, because the side that's not in is going to be developed and is currently as single family. You wouldn't actually put parallel parking in front of single family, but you might in front of townhouses as it redevelops. So this would be one possible option. Basically the same thing with more landscaping added if it was a 60-foot right-of-way. So 60-foot right-of-ways, like I said, they're limited right now. On the other hand, if somebody was to buy up an entire block and want to redevelop and give the city the right-of-way, we wanted them to have additional options that they could consider that might encourage better development.
Could I ask a question on
Sure.
the 10-foot roads? Is that, I think, Rex just said something about garbage trucks and various things. Is there going to be enough room on a 10-foot to get the trucks through? I know what they did on the circles, they allowed more area in the center that trucks could drive, big trucks could drive over. Is this going to work?
Yes. One of the reasons you go, because we're talking about this is the neighborhoods now. You have a
Yes.
20-foot, the 10 and 10 gives you 20-foot. The reason you do the 10-foot lanes, you want people to drive slow. You don't want to encourage them. That truck can easily get through and up and down there. That's not a problem. And your garbage truck's going to come through, once a week, pick up their garbage. And every one of us has had an occasion where the garbage truck decided to park in the middle of the street, and we had to wait 45 seconds to get around him. But that's the nature of any residential area. What we feel is important is you don't want to encourage higher speeds in these neighborhoods.
So those cobblestones that are masquerading as pavers, those are intended to encourage lower speeds also?
Well, these are not going to be cobblestones, are they?
No.
Those weren't supposed to be either.
No.
Well, I thought they were. I don't know. Okay. One other thing I like that you haven't mentioned yet, it's here, is you've got the pervious parking, but
Yes.
not on the roads.
Yes.
How come? It's too expensive?
Well, most of these designs are set up so that the existing roadway can be used. But one of the things that we do, because of the downtown and as part of the downtown project, we have that master drainage plan. And so, for a couple reasons, because this is going to be built within city right-of-way, we want a consistency within the parking and the drainage, because ultimately the city's going to be responsible for maintenance of
Well, is this going to go into
those.
that master drainage, or is it just going to seep into the ground?
Everything will go one way or another into that master drainage. It will be piped. There's existing ditches now, and there may be a debate amongst people how well they work or don't work.
It's gonna rain one of these days, we'll find out.
And we're gonna find out. But, you know, we're not gonna let somebody just fill in those existing ditches. They'll have to pipe it. And as part of that, we've already talked with Matt Feeney. And we're coming up with a section of how that'll work. And it's gonna be very similar. It's gonna be an exfiltration trench, some perforated pipe in a rock base. So it's
So
gonna be
there
the
will
same
be
thing.
something underneath this that guides it to the master.
It's going to be, I'm not going to say exact, but it's going to be very similar to what the city installed.
Okay.
Are
Thank you.
all the parking spaces the same width? I'm jumping ahead. I'm looking at the 45-degree parking.
Yeah.
Are,
We make those 9 or 10, the 45s. 10.
Where-
45s are 10.
I mean, to me, that's the best way to do it, but, I mean, the straight in, the 90-degree, that's risky, trying to get in and out of them is,
I think
Yeah.
he'll mention it's a particular.
Yeah, let's go ahead. A 50-foot right-of-way, this is parking on both sides of the sidewalk, much less landscaping. I suspect that in many areas, this will be the preferred, because it's going to treat both sides of the street equally, especially in areas in the first couple streets, as you get off of Phelps, you know, as you get into Shriver, Poland, and Horn, where you have the potential townhouse redevelopment. It makes a lot of sense for the street to be equal on both sides. And so I think you'll see this section the most, a little less green, but we will have a requirement for some tree islands. in
What,
the
what about
right-of-way that go.
bikers? It doesn't look like it leaves much room for bikers.
And this is in the inside, and we can talk about that in a second too. This is in the inside area where we talk about the housing developments. The sidewalks, of course, we've kept them a little bit wider than 5 feet. Actually, to the curb and everything at 6 feet. From the edge of curb to the sidewalk back is 6 feet. And in this instance, we had talked with Public Works, Matt Feeney, and he felt that trying to do a bike lane in here would be more dangerous. Either you do a sharrow or allow people to ride on the sidewalks.
I would assume they do. The bikes would be on the sidewalks in this narrow of a roadway.
This narrow of a road, right. And either you do the sharrow where you paint, where the cars have to share the lane with the bikes, or.
That's
you
more
allow them to stay.
dangerous, I think, than the bikes sharing the road with a person, because of
So-
the speeds and the volume involved with the
Well, and it's one of the
things that
reasons,
could
again,
collide.
you need to keep these roads narrow so that we keep those speeds down. But this particular, we would anticipate people would use the sidewalks.
Help me again, I wrote down the wrong thing, I think. We talked about Dean Street and Ragsdale as being 50 or 60.
I think Ragsdale is 60, Dean Street is 50.
I thought he said
Dean,
Phelps.
Dean Street is 50, so the illustration we're using here, for example, would be Dean perhaps.
Correct.
You have 2 or 3 segments for 50.
I think he said Phelps
Yes,
for the
yes.
60.
yeah, Ragsdale and Phelps, yeah.
Ragsdale and Phelps, okay.
Jay, when you talk about the consistency through all the streets, if it's chosen to have parking both sides, we give all the area up to the parkings. In other words, the concept is, we're trying to get more parking spaces. On the other sheet, you show a 3'8" planting lane and a bicycle lane.
Which
And
ones are you looking at?
it's on, after this slide right
So
here.
the next slide.
Yeah, it's just showing you the differences, and there wouldn't be an occasion where you would mix the two up, would there?
No, I think that what we have to do here is figure out what sections we think are appropriate, and then, and I think it's gonna be, and I hate to say first come, first served, but that's probably how it's gonna work, is that as we get people coming in wanting to redevelop, I've got people right now talking about buying up a couple different blocks, or trying to assemble some parcels. If they come in first and they say, you know, we think this works and here's why, here's our case, we're gonna evaluate it, look at the potential of the development next door, and set for that road, for that block, if you will, set that pattern. I think that's the only way that we can do it. We want the options because, and I'll give you an example. We have a few streets in there where people are acquiring property to establish a block. Old mobile homes and things that, you know, they see the value now, they can do this. On the other hand, you have a couple blocks that maybe there's one lot that isn't built on, and everybody else has a house that was built in the 90s. The chances of those things being redeveloped based on mortgages and everything else is probably not going to happen for quite a while. And they have back out parking, so in that instance, we may consider a different scenario that makes more sense for the redevelopment area, understanding this is going to stay this way for a long period of time, which is the reason we have the different scenarios.
So that's
way.
really what's going to govern it, is the different scenarios that you're faced with rather than one size fits all.
Correct.
For a certain street. This would not meet the multimodal or the complete streets idea without bicycles?
This one
It-
has a bicycle.
It meets the, it depends how you want to classify it. I'm gonna say yes, it does, and because I consider this the local road. I think when you really need bike lanes, when you get to collectors, the type of traffic, the nature of the traffic, some of these streets, I don't think that it's unsafe to just ride your bicycle on the road because you're not gonna have that level of traffic. And
Or the speed.
or the speed. And I grew up riding bicycle on the East Coast, 17 miles to the beach and back through the city, and you rode in the road. It's what you did, and you learned how to obey the rules and not get run over. So I think it's very compatible with the complete streets. One of the things that I think, and why I think Ragsdale probably won't fall into this, or if Ragsdale does, it's going to have to fall into one that probably has a bike lane, because Ragsdale, because of the nature of it, which is, other than Dean, is the only one that goes to Matheson, and people then want to go north or south.
Right.
It's a different character, it's a different volume, it's a different outcome.
So, what was I going to say here? Slipped my mind now about complete streets. So, I know what it was. Do we have an ordinance that says you can't ride your bike on a sidewalk?
State law.
State law?
But
You
it's-
can't?
All right, so let's explain this a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, bicycles are vehicles.
Yes.
Under Florida law. You're a former cop. I might have you do the explanation. So Chapter 316, generally, vehicles you're supposed to take on the road. Sidewalks, if they, most people, obviously, people who are really good bicyclists will not ride on a sidewalk because there's a series of problems. Most likely, sidewalks tend not to be in the same condition as a road.
We've got a bunch
So-
of old people here.
The old people, right, will feel a little differently. I think it comes down to skill set. So, I mean, if somebody's just recreationally riding a bike, I don't think any police would pull them over for that. But you can get a DUI on a bicycle, and most sidewalks have enough room and clearance so that you still have room for for pedestrians as well as. Incidentally, when I first
You wouldn't get ticketed.
No, you would not get ticketed. Incidentally, when I first moved to town and my kids were very little, I had a double stroller, and I was on the Bonita Beach bike path that runs parallel with Hickory Boulevard, and I was actually accosted by a retiree who was on a bike because he felt strollers do not belong on sidewalks. And I swear,
How'd that go over?
Yeah.
I was
He gets
fortunate
sued.
it was just me, because if I'm just by myself, I usually will take it. If my husband saw this guy's aggressive nature towards me with a 1 and a 3-year-old, the outcome probably would have been different.
Wow. Yeah, we're talking about this bikes on sidewalks versus roads. I just picked up, and I think it was AARP or one of those magazines, and the 5 top spots for pedestrians being in cars colliding were in Florida.
Right.
And the best spots were scattered all over the United States, from Colorado to some of the Northeast states and so on. But we had the top 5. That's why I was concerned about where to put bikes, because we like to ride.
It's a serious concern, and because of different skill sets, and it's the same issue with the Florida. There's 2 things that when they do these designs, so before, they didn't draw a picture just to say, hey, here's a cute picture. I hope you did it. What please tell me you did. They're looking at 2 things. They're looking at the Florida Uniform Traffic Control Law, because the city can't make certain changes. You have to follow Florida Uniform Traffic Control Law and other planning requirements under state law. And they're also looking at the minimum uniform traffic control device, is it minimum? MUTCD, which is the manual. You think I
Manual of
remember the word.
uniform.
The manual, MUTCD, which is the Bible. So, I mean, as far as the design of a charrette, the design of how you do everything, how you handle traffic control. The encyclopedia is very big, and that's part of their function. In order, you can make a design, but it has to conform with all of those requirements. Otherwise, the civil engineers will kill you guys.
Okay, Jay, you want to finish up?
Sure.
Mr. Sweet,
Yeah,
I have
well-
one question. In your opinion, down on Dean Street, one of the overall pictures here is to reduce traffic on Bonita Beach Road, and I look at Dean Street as a connection between Old 41 and Imperial, the only one other than Bonita Beach Road in the south part of the city. So if we restrict the traffic down next to Old 41, does that create a bottleneck to improve the traffic flow on Dean Street?
Not necessarily. I think there's a lot of factors involved in that question. And the first thing you have to do is determine what traffic wants to go where. And so, for what purpose are people trying to get to Imperial? Where do they want to go? And so there's too many factors to say that specifically. And then, of course, it's the nature of the development that's putting the traffic on the road also. I don't think it necessarily impedes it, because I think one of the things that you want to do is take traffic every way you can. Perfect example is the council's quadrant plan that you just talked about, where they're talking about having, basically getting Pennsylvania through Arroyo out to 41. That's going to take traffic to 41 potentially from the downtown through that entire area to get out there. The studies show a tremendous amount of traffic could be diverted off of Bonita Beach Road. So without doing a really in-depth analysis, it's hard to say, because you have to look at the residential units, you need to look at the shopping opportunities, the employment opportunities. You need to take all those things into consideration to do that model. The other thing is, quite frankly, anybody who's lived here long enough knows you don't necessarily want to go down Dean Street and speed, because the sheriff's office has figured a good way to get money on a regular basis on Dean Street.
Dean Street's only 30 miles an hour, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And they do enforcement down there very regularly.
Well, my question, it appears in the planning that Dean Street's only going to be 50 foot forever. So, so the thing that concerned me is the first going to Dorsch would be, what, 3 blocks?
Yeah, 3-4 blocks, yeah.
About 3 blocks. So if we restricted the traffic for the first 3 blocks, are we defeating the ability to use use Dean Street as a alternate to Old?
And I would say no, and from that point specifically, no. The way we're talking about putting traffic on Dean Street is parallel parking. I think that's less restrictive than, as you get further down street, all the back out parking that's been permitted of all the single family homes, which is much more dangerous, creates a bigger hazard. And it's and frankly, it's the reason that street has to be kept at that low speed, and that's the reason enforcement is so heavy down there, because of that.
You're saying each single family home has access onto
Yeah,
Dean Street?
onto Dean Street.
And so there's a great number of them.
And there's a great number of them down there, and they back out, and that's more of a problem than the parallel parking we're gonna have in the beginning.
Okay, I see
Plus,
your
what we're happening in the beginning there, that section, we're totally connected going north and getting, all the east-west roads also in the downtown. So I don't see that being a big issue.
Can we go back to bikes a minute? Wouldn't it be better to have at least one side being wider for the bike travelers and to stripe it? Not necessarily say you have to stay here, but give the walkers an idea of where they're supposed to be walking and the bikers an idea where they're supposed to be walking, so they'll know that and they'll stay out of possibly stay out of each other's way. Not guaranteed, but
If we were talking about a connectivity plan citywide, the answer is absolutely. The thing is here, we're looking at blocks that are basically 300 feet by 600 feet max, these blocks. And so there's going to be an intersection, everyone, there's going to be a four-way stop, or at least a two-way
But
stop, depending on how it
this
goes.
plan would accommodate it, just the way it is.
Well, this is a 60-foot right-of-way, and we don't have 60-foot right-of-ways in most.
Okay, but some
Okay.
of the other ones with having one side just a little wider than the other side would accommodate it.
I think so, but I think also as we approach downtown right now, one of the big concerns with the development community we're talking about is parking.
But it wouldn't
Everybody's-
necessarily take away from parking.
Well, in the 50-foot right-of-way, it does, because there's just not physically enough room. And you,
Well, if you made,
when you put that bike lane next to parallel parking, you don't want to do that. You want to share because people are opening doors into the bike lane. So that's the reason the DOT has a standard in areas of Little Havana, for instance, in Miami, you'll see the green painted sharrows and all these 50-foot right-of-ways down there, where the bikes are encouraged to ride in the road where the car would ride, so that with all the parallel parking, they don't have those conflicts.
Let me interrupt you if I could. Let's not turn this into a design session, but let's get on through this thing.
I'm just asking if there are ideas that they thought of, because that seems to be perfect to have one sidewalk smaller and the other sidewalk a little bigger, and a can of paint,
And
spray paint,
just-
whatever,
and again, not to
and
get
stripe it.
too into the weeds, but we also have to meet ADA standards for sidewalks, American Disability Act standards for sidewalks.
But it wouldn't be a stripe that a person couldn't go over.
The thermoplastic can be just as detrimental for bicyclists.
The what can?
The thermoplastic,
The striping
Yeah.
method they use.
Well, could it be paint?
there's different
Don't
maintenance
even
issues when
make
you
you
do
do
that.
Yeah.
Well, they do it for parking lots all the time.
Yeah, but parking lots are different than roads. You don't want to try to
But
lower
I'm
your
talking about
standards.
sidewalks, which are not getting heavy tires and 2,000-pound cars.
Still public right away, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
All right.
there's a
Right.
series of issues.
Okay.
Okay.
I had some other, okay, I know you want to do
That's
your
okay,
big
let's
thing.
go to the
Yeah.
next slide.
And I'm going to need to leave soon.
Here, and this is going to be, I'm going to say, the most controversial, and probably the least likely to happen in this form, but this is 90-degree parking in a 50-foot right-of-way. In order to accommodate that, the road would have to be rebuilt on an offset. But we wanted to show that that could work downtown. And I can't think of a situation where it really fits well, but we want to have that option. I do have somebody in right now who's talking to us. They have a 50-foot right-of-way, and they're willing to give up 12 feet of land
Wow.
in order to let 90-degree parking be in front of their project and jog the sidewalk across their property and everything, so that the sidewalk for the pedestrians would be there. And they would build, and by doing that, one of the reasons they want to do that is they want to be able to put a handicap space. And so it's something we're considering. Obviously, there would be a lot of things that have to be worked out yet, but we did want to show that you could do 90-degree in a 50-foot with the sidewalks, but the road would have to be rebuilt to off-center. And so, but if somebody wanted to come in there and buy up all the property and do something, you know, we wanted to have that option available to them.
What's the speed limit going to be on the old 4125?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Feeney, and I don't know, but I thought it was posted at 25 or 30.
Yeah.
It's now 30 right now.
You're talking about handicap, too. I have a friend who is handicapped, and she has a big wheelchair on the back of her car.
Mhm.
And are these parking spaces going to be long enough or deep enough to, depending on which way they park, to accommodate that?
Yeah.
Okay.
If,
It sticks out probably about 3 feet, maybe.
if, they're designed, you know, a standard F-150 pickup truck could parallel park in there, a car with a bike rack or, which is what basically they use for the wheelchair rack, shouldn't have any problem with
Well,
that.
this is bigger than a bike rack, but, all
What
right.
is the requirement on handicap parking in the downtown area? I mean, the stores have to have it, but is there any requirement for public?
I don't know of
Good
any
question.
requirement in public right-of-way
For what, handicap?
for handicap parking.
Actually, in chapter 316, there's handicap provisions.
But the handicap provisions in chapter 316 talk about the number of required spaces per use. And it's basically 4 for the first 100 and then 2% after that, 1 for the first 25. So,
A lot depends on the community design. If you're
Yeah.
going to have street parking like Coral Gables, you're going to need.
Well, I was thinking about the Riverside Park area. And,
and there's handicap parking space over there. And basically, when you do a park, there's a design standard. You say the park's going to generate so much, and then you do your calculations based upon the code for that.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before, but it's something that needs to be considered as we move along here.
Yeah, we're not proposing any parallel handicap spaces within the right-of-way. We see this as being extra,
Yeah.
and so the individual businesses would meet their handicap requirement that they have. If somebody was going to build a condominium or an apartment complex, they're going to have to address the handicap for that within their requirements. And it's really pretty simple. There are some provisions for retrofitting. So if someone is downtown, they want to retrofit, there's some deviation, for lack of a better word, that the statute allows in that. But it's all pretty standard. Florida actually has a ADA compliant manual that you can look at also. That gives you everything, and I mean, it tells you how high the toilet paper can be from the floor. I mean, it gets very detailed, so the rules are there.
Jay, let me ask, are you going to be reducing the options here pretty soon on this in the 50 and 60-foot right-of-way?
Right now, we want to get the discussion going. If you all see something you think is really bad, the last one I wanted to show you is this, because this is going to be, I think, the best use, but the way we've designed it is, I think, also the safest. It is the current thinking and traffic, and that is to, in a slow urban area, talk about traffic speed, to make your 45-degree parking back in. So,
Oh,
'cause-
wow.
and the reason is this: when you stop and you go to back in, people have already stopped behind you. You back in. When you're going forward, you have a clear view of the road before.
Yeah,
before
I
you
think it's a
exit.
great idea if I can back in and I can parallel park. But I can tell you, there are a lot of young drivers, first of all, that can't parallel park at all. Really.
Almost all old
And
drivers can't do it.
probably a lot of young ones that don't back up so well either.
But this
have to
is
learn.
especially and I'll give you a perfect example. I know that they're not crazy about it, but let's take the word library, like have those 45s. Especially if you have a street segment where you allow the 45-degree parking and there's houses that back out, you definitely want to be backed in so that you can see what's coming at you as you pull out.
Yeah.
And that's the reason we chose this
Okay.
as a standard.
I have another comment on some of these, where you only have parking on one side of the road. It makes it very difficult for somebody going on the other side of the road to find parking, because, I mean, you have to cross a lane, which you normally don't do, or you have to go down and make a U-turn somewhere, and this is a small area, so you'd have to go to a circle. I think you're making it very hard for people who want to pull into a place in particular, and you're going one way and the parking is on the other side. So by the time you get back, the parking's gone.
So let's
That's life.
let's be clear about these sections, though. That's a valid point.
I mean, I'm just,
No, it's.
these are
it's-
just ideas.
It's a valid point. These sections are for the downtown only. This is not a citywide.
no, I understand that, I understand
And
that.
so we're talking about being in areas where there's a lot of existing homes that are redeveloping, how to bring that all together.
And a lot of traffic,
And
residential, but traffic.
residential traffic, low speeds, but that's the reason for this. I don't think you're going to see people driving through the neighborhood looking for spaces. I think this is more of a redevelopment
Okay,
as someone buys up 5 single-family homes and comes in to build 12 townhouses.
I think
I think this
that
is really more the scenario that
if,
you're talking about.
if we sell this and it's popular, I think, yes, you will have people driving through neighborhoods trying to find spaces. And I see that 100-car parking garage is not going to suffice. And we want it to be successful.
Absolutely.
So, just a thought.
Would any of these 4 or 5 samples be used on Pennsylvania, for example?
No. No, the nature of Pennsylvania and the nature, I think, of Ragsdale, which, is the same, I do not foresee that happening unless somebody comes in and does a major purchase of property. Pennsylvania, as you go west of the railroad tracks, the volume of traffic, and I think in light of the quadrant plan and how that's going to affect that, I don't think you'll see any of this on that.
I had another thought, too.
What?
You have all of these planters, which are lovely, but you have some of them that are very wide, so I have a couple concerns. I was hoping you were thinking, because you do have some pictures of trees here, that they would be more trees going up where the big part of it is going to be high rather than low. So maybe you could put some small park benches around so people could stop at one of the places to eat and grab a snack and sit there or talk with somebody. Or husbands could wait for wives to shop. And my other concern about having a lot of bushes and everything is how they have to be trimmed so often, and how often are they going to flow out over the sidewalk or the roads. So, just a thought.
We
And-
have not gotten to that point.
Okay, well,
But I will say that I know that in the downtown, the council had a big concern about the type of trees. I suspect you're going to get something similar to what's been planted downtown for just that reason.
and people like shade, even if it's a palm
Well,
tree, they like.
The
like
intention
shade.
of the wider planters was specifically for canopy trees
Right.
to allow for walkability. So it would be what you're talking about, larger trees, and that's why you see the larger ones with the parking area with the larger tree where it kind of juts out. We can put a very nice canopy
Well,
tree
that
there.
would work, and you could
So-
also have like a planter around it that was a seat, serve two purposes, to keep people from getting on the roots of the tree and to have a place for them to sit and
Yeah.
talk.
No, and our main purpose here is just to get the concept of how we're going to build a park and do it. And then after that, we will turn it over and we'll talk to our city arborist and make sure that it's the right tree. I mean, I don't want to put trees in that all of a sudden are tearing up the asphalt and we have a problem that way.
No.
I don't
No,
want.
that would not be good.
So, and obviously you want something high enough, tall enough to provide the shade and things you want. So we had not gotten to that point of trying to figure out landscaping.
Jay, a comment on one of the plans, I think it's the second to last one, where you have 45-degree parking. I noticed the sidewalk is 8 feet 10 inches wide. Have you looked at one that takes some footage out of that and the roadway, which is at 11 here, and going to something that has a bike lane or green area on the right-hand side?
Which one are you looking at?
This one is up on the second to last plan.
The one that's up on the screen.
Yeah, if you went to a 5-foot sidewalk, that would give you about 3 feet, and then you gotta add a foot each for the lanes, so you really have about 7 feet. There's probably an option there that gets a more narrow sidewalk to match the one on the left-hand side.
Yeah, so put the ADA compliant 5-foot sidewalk in. That gives you 4+ feet. And then do 10-foot lanes, that would give you
It would give,
6+
it also
feet.
give you a
For
bike trail.
planting, you know, something like that, or bike
Or
lane.
Bike lane or planting.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll make a note and we'll do it another scenario that we can.
Okay.
Now,
forward
there,
that.
what is in the center of, there's nothing in the center of the road. Is it going to have a line down the center or something, or? So,
There are two schools of thought
I
on
mean, it's
that.
not a wide road. People might think, oh, I have the whole road to myself. Until somebody comes, then I have to swerve
There's
over,
actually some.
like a residential road.
There's actually some psychological studies that you'll notice that downtown, currently none of the roads are striped. And the reason for that is, if you read the literature, there is, people, believe it or not, if you put that stripe down the middle, will go faster. Because they feel
Really?
confident they know where their lane is.
Well, I think when you put that circle there.
Without the stripe, they're not sure where their lane is, so they tend to go a little slower. Until I read the study, I was
Yeah, that's surprising.
a little shocked that that is actually the case.
I think with me, by putting the circle there, it actually tells me that we've actually got roads going in two directions. But may
Yeah.
not mean the same to somebody else. I know in our residential area, the roads are fairly wide, and people just assume if there's not a car coming from the other direction, we'll drive down the middle.
Yeah,
Is that acceptable here?
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
because what it is that they, and this is where that psychology comes. They're not sure where they're supposed to drive,
Right,
so they tend to drive slower.
okay.
And when you give them that lane, it's like, oh, if I stay in between the lines, I can just, I can do it. And so, and that's one of the reasons you'll see in the vast majority of neighborhoods, you don't see a stripe down the road.
No. Interesting.
One of the things that I notice here, this plan, the 60-foot right-of-way plan for Phelps Street, and we're anticipating that Phelps is going to be commercialized, at least on the east side.
Yes.
We've written some special zoning requirements for Phelps Street as
It's
borderline commercial.
Yeah, it's a transition of a certain type.
Right.
What I would call a live-work, a true
Okay, but that,
mixed-use live-work.
those lots are relatively small, so I visualize that there will be a certain number of driveways crossing this, because there's no other way to get in to those properties. There's no alley or anything.
Correct. I mean, one of the things, and I know you've been down there, but as you go down there, you drive down Phelps, you've noticed that in several areas, they've shifted the road, so it's not in the center, and they've put 90-degree parking on one side. So they've already taken one of these scenarios and applied it for a good portion of Phelps, so that pattern is set.
Okay.
And they've put the wider street in. As you come further south, that pattern is not so well defined and set. And so, again, we'll have these options available to
Well, I
those who develop.
visualize in due time that Phelps will be an important commercial thoroughfare in the downtown area. I look for it to be the second thing to develop. And so I look at it and think, well, the pattern that we're laying out now for Phelps Street is the pattern that's going to, we're going to have to work around as we develop that commercially.
And no, that's absolutely true. And I think what you see, especially the corner of Childers and Phelps, you have the Women's Club or the Cafe of Life now. You can see that the city put parking in, and they shifted the road over. And the road is even wider as you went to the next block to Reynolds, and you actually see the jog in the road there as you drive it. So what you're going to see is that development pattern likely will be carried through the entire way of Phelps, I imagine. But I got to get somebody down there to start building to know how that development pattern is going to work out.
Just for a point of clarification, each street is going to have its own unique way of parking, so there won't be any uniformity through it in terms of you're gonna deem works best in that, for that particular street.
It could be that an entire street for 4 or 5 blocks have the same pattern. But we're not gonna mix a pattern in between blocks. So in between blocks, once the pattern's established, you're not gonna have 90-degree and one side and parallel on the other side, or go to 45 in one section and they come in, that would be confusing. But within a block, outside of those blocks, even within the same street, it is possible that there could be more than a different scenario to the next block.
Okay, any other comments?
No, I just wanted to say again, I really think that parking on both sides, if possible, is the best way to go, whatever way you do it, whether it's parallel or whether it's back end or what.
Okay?
Does that conclude presentation?
Unless, any other comments, I've written down the comments I got, but thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Let's take a look here at setting a meeting for next month. Is June 8th okay with everyone?
As long as you don't change it. 'Cause
so.
if you do, I won't be here.
Oh, it's that time of year, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So I'm gonna ask to be excused for July, August, September, and October.
I think that's fine with me, but Sam, could I be excused July?
For the month of
No.
July?
Well, for the day that we meet in July.
Oh,
I
sure.
think I'm going to need that.
okay, sure, that'd be fine.
Thank you.
And of course,
June 8th's okay with me.
okay,
I mean, it's possible I can make it, but I don't think so.
is that okay with you, Rex? Jeff? Okay, June 8th will be fine. And do I hear a motion on the minutes or comments on the minutes?
I move they be approved as written.
Second?
Okay, minutes have been approved. I don't need to take a vote on that, but
I wasn't here.
Henry Byrd,
Yes.
Rex Sims.
Yes.
John Colapetro.
Yes.
Jeff Maturo.
Yes.
Carolyn Gallagher.
Yes.
Chairman Vincent.
okay, the meeting is adjourned.